Okay, so I'm not going to jump in just quite yet. We'll talk a little bit logistics of the course. So again, this is EDUC 394, test and measurement in special education. Most of you are not going to end up in special education, so I very much am going to be focusing on the relation between general education assessments that are currently out there and special education assessments. So you will definitely get both of them in this class. All right. So Tuesday, Thursday class. Overall, I'd say that you know, in the evaluations, when you say how hard did you work in this class relative to some other classes, this one I think goes on kind of the easier side of things. There's definitely going to be some release time for you to work on different projects. We're not going to be meeting hard and fast Tuesday, Thursday every single week. So do make sure that you are checking the course schedule that's on Moodle, and I'll make sure it's abundantly clear if we're not going to have a class on any given day. Live lecture, lots of discussion, lots of group work to the degree that we can. I'll probably try and make it such that our groups are kind of 1, 2, and 3, maybe a 4th or 5th one, depending on how it all works. Group work is largely going to be contained to within the class. It's not necessarily going to be group turn-in assignments. Those are still going to be individual, but those assignments are going to largely be based off of what you do in the class. All right. This class is, content-wise, we're going to be going over different types of assessments that are used for reading, for ELA, for math, and then we're going to work a little bit at the end of the semester on creating our own assessments. I've kind of structured this class in a different way every single year I've taught this, and I've taught this every year that I've been here. So even though it's my 7th time teaching the course, it's the first time that I've taught this class in this way. So we'll see how it goes. If there's something that you've seen that totally juxtaposes to what I'm talking about here, by all means ask. This class is not about 100% right or wrong. This is how you are definitely going to do assessment when you get into the classroom. As we're going to see, assessment means a lot of different things. It's going to look different for every single one of you. It's going to look different than what we talk about in here. I want to get you guys familiar and comfortable with the ideas behind assessment, and then we'll look at some specifics along the way. All right. Grading wise, the syllabus is on Moodle right now, but it's very thin. It's open to a lot of, it's just very malleable for these reasons. Grading wise, the plan right now is to be very assignment heavy, production assignment heavy. So you guys will be putting out whether they're responses or doing a little bit of research and responding to that, or creating your own assessment types of things, like being very active and engaging with the conceptual ideas that we're going to be going over. No tests. I think there's going to be a final project on creating your own assessment, doing a little bit of analysis on that, but no discussion boards, none of that stuff. The online people have to do a discussion board. So online people, you have discussion boards. And then field experience wise, we'll kind of see how things go. Assessment is a challenging course to do virtual field experiences because you actually need to be giving assessments and then analyzing it. So what the assessment looks like is going to be a little bit, or sorry, what the field experience looks like is going to be a little bit up in the air. So bear with me on that. I'm not worried about it until the second half of the semester. We'll see how things go. We'll make a decision when we get there. Okay. Sound good? Any questions? Anything from syllabus-wise that you need to know that I'm forgetting to tell you? Cool. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and get started. What is assessment? Opening question for you guys. Tell me what you think assessment is. Why is it there? What is it for? What does it do?
It's a test to determine what a student has learned.
Okay, great. At its core, assessment is, I'm going to hold off on the word test for a second, but I'm glad you used that word. It's, I'll substitute that with measurement. You all right with that? Okay. It's a measurement of what a student knows about what you have taught them. Cool, I like that. What else? I feel like I should stand here and then I can just look this way. What else is assessment?
It's an observation of where a student might stand academically or anything else.
Okay, good. So an observation of where a student might stand at any given time, right? So you, sorry, your name? Hope. Oh, nice to see you. I know what your name's from emails and things. Hope identified measurement relative to what you have taught them. And Taylor's kind of looking at kind of removing the what you've taught them and just saying a given point in time, right? Okay, so two different ideas. Yeah.
Can assessments also be used to tell where the teacher might be going wrong with something?
Awesome. I love that. I love that. I love that. So not from a student-focused perspective, but a teacher analyzing their own behavior, right? Am I going astray as a teacher? Excellent. What was your name?
Seth.
Seth, nice to meet you. What else? Maybe not what is assessment. We have 3 really good responses to that, but why do we assess? Yeah.
Compare where a student was maybe before you started educating to where they are now.
Perfect.
So the assessment looks the bar right there to see where they are.
Excellent. And your name?
Brennan.
Say it again.
Brennan.
Brendan, nice to meet you. So Hope and Taylor kind of look at 2 different spots, and Brennan's saying maybe we can compare those. Absolutely, absolutely. I could even throw in Seth's of evaluation of teacher itself, saying, did I get them from A to B? Excellent. What else?
You could look at where students are in relation to each other.
Okay, comparative to self and to each other. Excellent. What else? How a student learns. How can we do that on an assessment? How do we do that on assessment? Not how can, how do we do it? You're absolutely right, 100%.
Different ways. Not just one way.
Okay. What's the tried and true, obvious way, 2 different ways to assess people? What are 2 different ways to assess one question? Multiple choice, fill in the blank. For short essay, short answer, right? Selection responses versus constructed responses. We're going to talk a lot about that. How many of you like multiple choice? How many of you hate multiple choice? How many of you like essays? How many of you hate essays? All right. You learn in different ways. You assess, you test in different ways. And those are important differences. There are many other differences or other ways to look at it beyond just selected and constructed responses. Excellent. What else? How do we test? What are some different ways that we look at actual assessments?
It doesn't have to be a written thing. It could just be a reading thing.
Okay, good.
Like one they do in school is like the thumbs up method.
Excellent. Excellent. What else?
We can have an activity instead of a traditional test.
Perfect. Activities. Activities. I love that. What else?
You can split people up into groups and see how they interact with one another.
Okay.
And see how they progress. And
Good. Good. What else? Keep going. Am I assessing you guys right now? How am I assessing you? What am I doing? I'm just asking questions, right? Right? What I hope you will see is that anything that really involves an interaction between a student and a teacher is an assessment. If it's not, it's a test. If there is no interaction between what the teacher says, how the student responds, and how the teacher then responds to that, which is what you were talking about. Did I get them there? Right, so that's a test. That's just show me what you know. I don't care what you know, just show it. And I'm going to put a score in a scorebook. That's a test. Assessment is interactive. Assessment allows us to measure. It allows us to adapt. It allows us as teachers to make decisions. Can you think of anything that goes on in a classroom where the teacher should not be making a decision based off their student responses?
Learning disabilities, if they have learning disabilities.
Should I still be making decisions based off of that? Like if I'm interacting with a student with a disability, I should be asking it, let me rephrase, with the intent to make a decision.
I see, okay.
Yeah. You guys see that? With that idea, everything in a classroom can be an assessment. What you do or what turns it into an assessment is based on what you as a teacher do with that information. There's absolutely going to be times where I ask questions, you guys ask questions in your classrooms. You get responses that are either out of left field or you're just having fun or whatever, that you don't do anything with that information. That's not even a test. That's just, it is what it is. But it's something different from assessment. If you make a decision based off of your students' responses, you assessed something. Whether that's an important something, a critical something, educationally relevant in any way, shape, or form, it's an assessment. An assessment is a good thing. Testing is very aversive. Most people don't like tests. Tests are high pressure. Tests are one time, you show up, you get it, you either do it or you don't. SAT is a test. ACT is a test. Praxis is a test. No one's responding to them, right? No one's changing their behavior because of them. An assessment is this living, interactive tool in a classroom with a purpose. Our focus this semester is going to be on assessment. There will definitely be times where I juxtapose things with tests, where we look at how a test might treat something and how an assessment might treat something. And there are going to be times where I say the word test and I don't mean it. I apologize in advance. But it's just so ingrained in us. The other thing that I think is important to think about with tests versus assessment, how many of you like it when you hear the word test? It's like this really, really negative connotation, right? Testing, it's test day, all the pressure, right? Assessment, you're like, okay. How many of you have that same negative reaction to assessment? It's not there. It's not that, if nothing else, assessment is closer to a neutral word. In a classroom, I think that's really, really important. Kids already, first graders, second graders, they know test day. And it's a bad thing. It's a scary thing. For most kids, not all kids. We don't need to look at things that way. When you have, I'm getting way ahead of myself. That's okay. When you have effective assessment in your classroom, when you get to the test, is there ever going to be a surprise? No, right? If you've had good assessment, if I ask you good questions, you give good responses or bad responses, and I adapt to you, then I know what you know. I know what you don't know. I know where your strengths are. I know where your weaknesses are. By the time I get to the grading point, whether that's a test or an assessment, I know how you're going to do it, right? And that's on me as a teacher. That's what this semester is about. Learning how to look at different assessments, whether they are made by you, whether they are given to you by a curriculum maker, whether they're given to you by an assessment maker. How can we work with those results to do something meaningful? What do those different types of assessment look like for different subjects? How do we adapt those assessments for special education students? And what does it all kind of give us at the end of the day? All right, cool. So you'll see I do this from time to time. I talk way ahead of my PowerPoint, so I apologize in advance. All right, so here is a definition of assessment from a text that I no longer use, but I really, really like. Educational assessment is a formal attempt to determine student status with respect to educational variables of interest. It's a mouthful. Take a second, read over it. I'll read it again. Educational assessment is a formal attempt to determine student status with respect to educational variables of interest. In the past, my question is, what are the key words in that definition? And I think over the last 6 or 7 years, every single word in there has been listed by students here as important in some way, shape, or form. And I think that that's all accurate. What I want to know is what in here separates assessment from an idea of testing. Yeah.
Variables.
Variables. Okay. How so? What does that mean to you? First, let's start that way.
Whenever I hear that, even if I'm misinterpreting it, I see it as being testing them without them being ready to test or knowing if they're ready to test or not.
Okay.
So it's sort of like gauging them without without expecting them to know exactly what to say or
Gotcha.
to know.
Gotcha. Okay. So the way that I'm interpreting that is that in a test, like we were talking about before, it's really this moment in time. Forget preparedness, forget expectations, forget anything. Like you just here it is, show it, right? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Versus assessment, which is going to be more intentional. It's going to be building towards something. Yeah? A little bit? It's fine. We'll come back. Clarify your thoughts. Yeah. What else? What words in here? Let's do it this way. Let's go through the definition because it's a big definition. So educational assessment is a formal attempt. Let's start right there. Formal attempt. What does that mean? What does that mean to you guys? Formal attempt. Okay, to me, it's intentional. That's the word that I look for, but official, right? Like we are. Good. Okay. I like that. So you have objectives, you have standards, you have goals, you have all these specific ideas that need to be assessed at some point. There's a lot out there that can be an educational variable of interest. What I think all of this together means is we are going to intentionally measure things that are relevant. That's really what it comes down to. Intentional measuring of variables that are relevant and really to what we have discussed or what we will discuss. Looking at some of the bigger tests that are out there, the SAT, the ACT, which have come under fire in all sorts of different ways over the past 15 years or so. A big concern was that those tests were measuring things that some students had not even come into contact with, right? It's hard to argue that those are educational variables of interest if not everyone is even exposed to them. There are issues with that argument, and we'll get there eventually. But that educational variable of interest has to be a relevant part of the equation. What are the standards? What are the objectives? What is it that we are measuring? Okay. How does that separate from testing? I've keyed in on formal attempt, student status, and educational variables of interest. How does testing separate from that idea? Yeah.
An assessment can mold to a student while testing is static.
Okay.
It's not going anywhere. It's
Good.
the same.
Good. So, and that's something that we're going to look at probably either Thursday or Tuesday are some of the different types of assessments. And I think what I'm assuming what you're getting at is this idea of like a standardized test versus this question and conversation. And how do we look at kind of these two extremes, right? Good. And there's definitely an element of that, right? So to me, that's the student status with respect to variables of interest. So when we're having conversations, when we're asking questions, I can mold my assessment to, in real time, to how you guys actually respond. But a standardized test, just boom, 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 has no ability to do that.
But even if the test is, even if it's well molded to students, if they don't understand a question, they can't ask you to redefine the question in a way they can better understand.
Good.
Like they could in an assessment.
Good. I like that. So when you have the language of the test, you have to respond to that, and I, the teacher, can't interpret that for you in any way. And you guys, how many of you went through either a Common Core testing or Louisiana State testing like in your later elementary into high school years? So that's something you guys know exactly what that means, where you have this kind of out of left field language that the test has to use, right? That's something that has happened as I've been an educator. I haven't experienced that for myself. I've only seen it be taught and heard teachers gripe about it. Probably your teachers gripe about it. So that's something that I'd love to talk more about later. Good. What else? what else sets this apart from testing?
It sort of seems like testing is way more concerned with the variable of interest instead of the student status. So like, a
Okay.
test kind of like if you have, this is like the student's progress, and it takes this one snapshot like right here when they take the test, but it's not factoring in what they learned from the test or how it could have molded around them or anything, like kind of like the set. So it's really like a one moment on this day, how are they doing? So how have they been doing, or how will they be doing after?
Good. It's almost like we are more interested in how well the population knows math than how well you, the student, knows math. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Right, and it's also, I don't know, if it was, I'd prefer to have an assessment over a long period of time and be able to like ask questions and correct things so they're better next time instead of just, oh, you're wrong right here. Like you're wrong on this day and now you made a bad grade. Maybe if you reconcile it or fix it to a knowledgeable chance, this is where I take the test.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And yeah, I'll just let that stand. That's excellent idea. Good. So we're already starting to see that there are some, so hopefully significant differences between this living, breathing assessment and this much more rigid, static test. And what I want to make sure that you're able to separate the standardized test, because there are standardized assessments that are very, very high quality, where all the things that we just talked about, it's a moment in time, it's very rigid, but it still gives us information that we can respond to as teachers. And that to me is the big difference. Okay. Good. So why do, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
But would one of those like super strict assessments be like a poll, like asking the class how they think something's going, and then having like a good or bad answer to choice?
So I'd say it depends. And in that situation, I would say it depends on what I do with that information, right? If we say, if I'm teaching a math class and I finish a content, a lesson, and I say, all right, how do we feel? Thumbs up, sideways, or down? And everyone goes thumbs down. So I just took a poll. And I say, great, everyone go to your workbook, right? I just tested you. I now know that you all failed by your own assessment, right? But I'm not doing anything about it. If everyone goes thumbs down and I say, okay, let's step it back, let's revisit some things, then that same poll becomes an assessment. And I'm now altering my behavior as a result. All right, cool. So why then do we assess? We're going to go over the why, the how, and all those different things. But I think it's important to understand the different motivations for assessment. Number one, it has become law, right? If you are a public student or a student in a public school, particularly elementary through high school, the law says you must be tested in these ways, at these times, with these tests. Assessments, tests, whatever you're going to call it, right? They're leap testing. Is that what is it? Is that what it is now? Leap testing? Yeah. I can't keep them straight from year to year. Why is that the law? Why is that in place? Why is that there? When I was in middle school, high school, elementary school, that was not the case.
Wasn't that part of the No Child Left Behind?
It was part of No Child Left Behind. You guys familiar with No Child Left Behind? A little bit? All right. Are you all familiar with why it's not the law anymore? It doomed every school to be closed within about 8 years. All right. Parts of what remained, though, they tried to make work, and annual assessments is absolutely part of that. Assessments are put in place from a legal perspective for accountability. Not student accountability, teacher accountability, school accountability. The assumption is that your children are what you make them. There's truth in that. There's some fallacies in that. But it's held there that if you are a good teacher, if you are a good school, then you should be able to pass, your students should be able to pass this test, this assessment, relative to everyone else. You guys think of some problems with that argument? Couple, right? That has since been changed, and now different states look at how to measure in different ways. When I was doing my teaching, it was towards the end of the No Child Left Behind era and into the Common Core era. I was teaching in New Jersey, and New Jersey adopted, so No Child Left Behind was adequate yearly progress. New Jersey adopted something that was like a year-over-year growth. So in third grade, you had your first formal assessment. That was the first year that actually counted. You weren't scored, you weren't judged on that though. You were judged on your growth between third grade and fourth grade. And in fifth grade, you were judged on your growth between fourth grade and fifth grade. So if you started at a lower benchmark, but you maintained growth, it didn't matter how high or low that growth was. You had to continue to show growth though. I thought that was a much more reasonable means of evaluation. All right. What you have to know though, understand with the impetus behind statewide testing is it comes down to funding. Where is the state going to put its dollars? Limited resources, there are ever expanding classrooms, fewer teachers. Where are we going to put our limited resources? Whether you want to make the argument that students or that schools that get high test scores should get the resources, or schools that get low test scores need the resources, neither here nor there at this point in the game. Let's go get a higher ed or a ed policy degree if you want to do that. But the law is in there for finances. And that's the reality, right? And I think that that's important to understand because you are going, when you guys go to be teachers, and I'm not trying to make you jaded on year, whatever you're in. I want you to understand that when it comes to the testing environment and when your principals react however they're going to react to testing weeks, some make it a very high pressure situation, some make it a very low pressure situation, there's real repercussions for doing poorly or doing well. So understand that that's a real variable that needs to be taken into account. It's not just how did our students do? How did this one student do? It's, are we going to be funded at the same way? Can we continue to do what we are doing? That's a very, very real variable that must be understood. So why else do we assess? Now we get to go to the good reasons that we care about as teachers. All right. We want to know where students are at the start. We want to know where students are at the end. We want to know if they acquired the knowledge that we hopefully taught them over time. We want to be able as teachers to know what to do next. Did we do enough? Do we need to revisit? Can I go on? Do I need to go way back? Can I jump way ahead? You will be in a situation as a teacher where you give a pretest and you will have one student who knows everything on the pretest. You'll have one student who knows nothing on that pretest. Most of you will then be in the situation where regardless of the 0, the 100, and everywhere in between, you teach the same lesson. That pretest was a test, not an assessment. You guys see that? You as the teacher are not responding to the data that are now in front of you. 0, 50, 100, Great, you're all getting the same thing. We get to the end, 25, 50, 100. You didn't respond. You didn't respond to the child who maybe needed some prerequisites. You didn't respond to the child who already knew everything on that test and needed to be taught in a different way or different things or be challenged in a new way. That's a test, pre-test and post-test. Pre-assessment and post-assessment is where you say, okay, you 5 got between 0 and 30. You 5 got between 30 and 60. You 5 got between 60 and 90. And you 5 got between 90 and 100. Go into different groups, activity 1, 2, 3, 4. That's an assessment. I am now altering my instruction to you as an individual based on your pre-test scores. To the group that got 0 to 30, maybe I give you another pre-test that goes a little bit back, goes a little bit further back. To you got 90 to 100, I give you another pre-test that goes a little bit higher. I want to make sure that you are learning in the ways that are meaningful to you, all right? Finally, but last on my list, identify the ways in which students demonstrate knowledge. You said that? You mentioned that? Who was that? Someone said that. Different ways in which students learn. Garrett, that might be Garrett, sorry. Identify the ways in which students demonstrate knowledge. This is a huge one, and I think it's a really underutilized one. How many of you have taken a test, an assessment, where you've answered the same question as a multiple choice question and in an essay question? See that, it shows up, right? Test order matters because sometimes the same question or the same content does show up in multiple places. And if you take the multiple choice question first, that might impact your essay score and vice versa, right? Understanding that just because I asked you a question a specific way doesn't mean you're going to necessarily be able to answer that question in that way is huge to a teacher who's trying to assess their students. I had a student, when I was teaching in a 3rd grade classroom, I asked the question. She looked at me like I had 4 eyes. I asked it a different way, still didn't get it, asked it a 3rd way, still didn't get it, asked it a 4th way. She said, why didn't you just ask me that way the first time, right? That being able to go back and forth, ask things in different ways, taught me, okay, she understands that language. I need to teach her the other language. That's how you extrapolate that specific example, but that goes across the board. If I have students that can respond perfectly to multiple choice questions, but can't write an essay on the same content, I need to focus on that concept development from an essay perspective, vice versa. If they can't, if they can speak about it, but can't write it. If they can write about it, but they can't speak it. If they can draw it, but they can't answer multiple choice questions. All of this information tells me a ton of information about how my students demonstrate knowledge. All right. What you do with that, I think, is really important. We'll talk about this a lot more towards the end of the semester, but some people are of the opinion that you lean in to students' strengths. Others are of the opinion that you lean into their weaknesses. You lean into a student's strengths, you're able to get through more content. You lean into their weaknesses, you make them more well-rounded. I don't think there's a better or a worse. I think it's just two sides of the same coin. How many of you had different teachers that addressed that in different ways? How many of you had a teacher where if you were really strong, let's say, in speaking, but had a more challenging time writing, they would allow you to vocalize your answers? You want to have something like that? Never kid? No? A little bit? Okay. Versus, I do well speaking, but I struggle writing. So the teacher leans in and says, okay, we're going to double down and really work on writing. All right? You see the two different types of responses that you would get there? The two different ways? Good. So again, not an exhaustive list of why we assess, but knowing that there are multiple reasons out there, it's not just performed, I think is really important. How do we assess? Separating these words from that formal interaction that we talked about on the first slide, there are formal assessments and there are informal assessments. The technical definition of formal and informal here. So formal assessments are assessments that have been developed, standardized, and tested against various populations. Those formal assessments we typically think of as the standardized tests, but that's not 100% true. They are in there, but they're not all of it. Informal assessments are assessments that are less structured and generally used to assess progress on a specific program or line of content. All right. So what are some formal assessments? We do have standardized tests in there. Norm reference tests. Do you guys know what norm reference means? No? Okay, I'll get back to that. Criterion referenced, there's testing procedures, there's statistical analysis. All right. So norm reference. Y'all familiar with the bell curve? Yeah. Okay. That's what the bell curve represents. What's called a normal population. All right. If we gave this one question to everyone in the world, then we would get a bell curve. A normal population is some subset of everyone in the world that also produces as close to a similar curve as everyone in the world. So it's a normalized population. I know you guys probably can't see this over there, but I'll do my best. I draw like in this corner, maybe you guys can see a little bit. Jackie has no chance. So if this is the bell curve of everyone in the world, n equals 6 billion. So I give one question. I ask one question to everyone in the world. Some people ask, it's whatever. One question doesn't work. I give a test. All right, it's got 10 questions. This is 0 right. This is 10 out of 10. This is 5 out of 10. All right, that all make sense? If I then say, okay, I can't give that 10 question test to everyone in the world. So I'm going to give it to 10,000 people. And I'm going to hope that their responses represent what the whole world would represent. But let's say in those 10,000, I get something like this. This is not a normal population. All right, so what might that look like? That might look like on an educational test, that might be, I'm giving this test I'm going to be giving this test to everyone in the country. I need a population to compare them to. So I give this, and let's say it's a language test, all right? I give this test to 5,000 students. I'll make it really easy for you guys to understand, and I apologize if I'm letting some bias come through. To a language test to 5,000 students from Southern Louisiana. Is how students in that region going to be representative of how everyone in the country uses language? No, right? Nor should it be. Nor should it be. So when you're looking for in these populations, it's something that generally represents the wider population as a whole. What's the purpose of that? How many of you have taken some test before, some assessment, and you found out that you are in the 90th percentile? 85th. 50th. something like that. You get that score, and it gives you a percentile, right? That's you as compared to the normal population, the normed population, you would have gotten in the 90th percentile of that population. You guys see that? So it's comparing you to the normed population that took this test. That's what that's looking at. There was a test called the test of Iowa Basic Skills. All right. Why is it called the Iowa Basic Skills? Every year they gave it to the population of Iowa, and that was the country's normal population. I don't know if that was accurate or not. That's what they did. They figured that somewhere right in the smack dab in the Midwest, that was representative of the whole country. Okay, so that's what norm referenced means. Criterion referenced, much more straightforward. Your score is a function of the percent of questions that you get right on the test. 100 questions, you get 90 of them right, you got a 90%. That's your criterion. Okay. In norm reference, I had a friend that, so the SATs, the ACTs, those are norm referenced tests. Right? You get percentile ranks from that. I had a friend who on the SAT 2 math, he was really, really good at math. He got a perfect score on the math section. He was in the 92nd percentile with a perfect score. That means 8% of people that this was normed to got a perfect score. It shows an issue with that test, but it shows the difference. He didn't get 100%, which would have been his criterion reference score. He got in the 92nd percentile, which was his norm reference score. Okay, there's a, Eli's look totally lost. A little bit. Go back and look that up. It's easy enough to understand. These are different types of formal assessments. That's all you need to know. Formal assessments do have testing procedures, right? This is the, everyone open your booklet, get out your number 2 pencil, bubble in your name, that whole type of thing. There's a reason for that those are there. Those procedures are what make the assessment valid. That does not speak to how you are going to use the results. And that's the difference between your test and your assessment. Informal assessment, then, is everything else. All the questions, all the activities, the thumbs up, the thumbs down, the talking something through with a partner, everything else that you do is informal assessment. That's going to be a formal assessment. Anything that has that, I don't know what happened. Okay. Anything that has that flexibility would be informal here. Okay. Good. All right. Time is it? Perfect. Okay, I'm going to stop there for today. On Thursday, when we come back, we're going to focus on these 3 types, go more in more detail about these 3 types of assessment, talk a little bit more about what they mean, what they look like. Not going to get into the specifics of the different types or content areas, but that will be our launching point for the semester. All right, cool. Any questions? All right, thank you very much, and I'll see you on Thursday.